All right, folks, welcome back. It's time for the You Know What You Love It, Steve Malzberg panel. And joining us on the panel at this time, I'm happy to say, is Grace Marie Turner, our friend, the president of the Galen Institute. We're in pursuit of Pete Hoekstra, former congressman from the great state of Michigan and former chair of the House Intelligence Committee. So you guys will let me know when the congressman joins us. But Grace Marie, how are you?
Hello, Steve. Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you on. We got a lot to talk about, so I'm very glad we have two segments. Let's talk about the Supreme Court decision today. And of course, Pete being from Michigan, I can't wait to hear his take on it. But it's always a good day when common sense prevails and the Supreme Court has a decision that's even better than 5-4. It was actually 6-2.
Absolutely. And this was a constitutional amendment passed by the voters themselves. And so it's really very difficult for the Supreme Court to say that this is not valid. This is clearly the will of the voters who have seen the effect of affirmative action in really enhancing discrimination in many ways. The Supreme Court agreed, and Justice Ginsburg, I thought, was interesting when she said in her dissent that sometimes the voters get it wrong. Well, I'm sorry, this is a representative democracy, and that is, the voters have had their say, and I'm pleased to see that the Supreme Court upheld that.
You know, using her logic in this day and age, favoring and saying that the voters got it wrong because we still need racial quotas, especially on anything, on any job. It's this. I just don't think there's a need for it anywhere. But to college admissions, we need racial quotas. I mean, that it just shows to me a lack of understanding of where we are as a society, where we hope to be, where we're going. I mean, I think we're here, and I think that. I just think if Martin Luther King Jr. Is looking down upon us and he sees that there are still racial quotas, he'd be appalled.
I think so. That really what we're talking about is equality, and we have seen the impact of these racial quotas that really wind up disadvantaging minorities in many different ways, and disadvantage people who have an otherwise legitimate case that they should have those admission slots themselves. And so I think it's good to begin, and I think it shows an evolution of the democratic process where people try something, they see the effect, and then they begin to readjust that and say, maybe there's a better way to get to the same result, but to do it in a way that's really in concert with our Constitution.
And you know what's so funny, Grace Marie, and sad really, is that so many of the people on the left who will be outraged on college campuses, namely professors in this case, are probably some of the same ones of the 200 in Minnesota and the 200 at Rutgers that individually at each university respectively banded together to try to keep Condoleezza Rice from showing her face on campus. Here you have probably the most successful black woman, politically speaking, in the history of the United States, if not overall successful, and they don't want her on their campus because they don't like her, they disagree with her. I mean, you talk about equal representation. They don't appear to have much interest on college campuses these days in equal representation of opinion. They just like, to be able to say, X amount of blacks, X amount of browns, X amount of Asians, X amount of whites.
Right, it's a very distorted definition of equality, isn't it? And I heard one of the people who was very unhappy about the decision, one of the college professors, say, well, the Supreme Court has taken the gloves off and we're going to go do that too. Well, that's not the democratic process. We go through elections, we go through the courts, we make decisions, and then we live with them. And yet they're saying, no, we don't agree with this. The minority is going to rule, and we're going to do sit-ins, we're going to do demonstrations to show that they're going to try to figure out some other way to reverse this. We've seen it in California with some of the referendums that have been passed, particularly Proposition 8, where the left really rises up and starts to attack those who supported these provisions. So I think it's really unfortunate when the left doesn't get its way, it attacks any way they can to try to overturn what they consider to be equality, even though the will of the people may have a different perspective.
Right, and it'd be interesting to see the Democrats try to make an election issue out of this when, in fact, the overwhelming majority of people in this country, I'm sure, I haven't seen the latest polls and I can't cite the latest one that I did see, but I'm sure they would say that there's no room for the most part in racial quotas in this country anymore. So once again, people in the mainstream will be made to feel like they're crazy by the media when in fact they're in the mainstream, and it's the media that's out of touch with America. Let me ask you about another issue here, and this took place. There wasn't a lot of network media coverage on this at all, and I think I could guess why, because here we go again. The president, the attorney general, coming up with they're going to come up with ways to grant clemency to drug dealers and drug offenders who are in jail right now because they feel that the sentences at the time were too stringent. And you know, it harkens me back to Eric Holder going, when he was number 3 at the Justice Department under Clinton, going to the FALN bomb makers and saying, basically, paraphrasing here, the point was, haven't you served enough time? Don't you want to get out? Don't you want clemency? They didn't petition him. He went to them. And now we have this same thing here. Another example of, you know, this administration, whatever they're going to do, if they do it that way, just running roughshod over the way laws are supposed to be changed and enforced.
You're right. I mean, it really gets to the fundamental question of the rule of law, doesn't it? But with this administration, you always have to look at what is the political motivation. Now we are moving into an era of prison politics. What's behind that? And I think we really need to look at what the agenda is here, because when you are really tossing aside the rule of law and saying, well, we're not going to abide by the rules and the sentences that were issued by judges under sentencing guidelines often, to say, well, we're going to throw that out because we no longer agree with it, just as the Attorney General has decided.
Right. You know what, Grace Marie, hold that thought, because I want to come back and ask you what you think is behind it when we come back and reconvene here. Steve Malzberg, Grace Marie Turner on the Malzberg panel right here on the Steve Malzberg Show, interestingly enough, on Newsmax Television.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.